Petra's greatest water problem was not only drought, it was what happened when rain arrived all at once. Months later, the same channel could lie dry beneath the sun, while every household still needed water every day. Petra had springs, seasonal runoff, and a wadi, but no large, reliable river flowing beside the city throughout the year. Yet thousands lived here, caravans arrived, workshops operated, and monumental buildings rose from the sandstone basin around them. Petra eventually supplied fountains, gardens, baths, and ritual spaces, uses that demanded far more than emergency drinking water. No single dam, cistern, spring, or aqueduct explains this. Survival came from a connected sequence of water systems. The first dependable supply came from springs in the surrounding highlands, especially Ain Musa east of the city. Engineers used elevation itself, guiding spring water downhill through channels and pipes, into Petra without any mechanical pumps. When storms struck bare sandstone, water rushed from steep slopes toward wadis, carrying both opportunity and danger downward. Small channels intercepted that runoff before it vanished downstream, directing it toward basins, terraces, and underground storage chambers. Before storage, wider basins slowed the flow, allowing sand and heavier sediment to settle out from the water. Rock-cut cisterns turned brief winter storms into reserves that could survive for many months beyond the rainfall itself. Capturing water was only half the problem. The rest had to be diverted before it entered the narrow as-Siq. A dam redirected dangerous floodwater into the Mudhlim tunnel, bypassing Petra's ceremonial entrance and much of the urban core. Meanwhile, controlled spring water traveled along the as-Siq in channels and terracotta pipes fixed directly into the rock. Modern hydraulic models suggest its slope and partial flow reduced damaging pressure and leakage at vulnerable joints along the route. None of this ran by itself. Channels clogged, plaster cracked, reservoirs filled with silt, and every failure required organized labor. Petra survived by making springs, storms, rock, gravity, storage, and maintenance behave like one artificial river. Where did it begin? The network began outside the city, where groundwater escaped through fractured highland rock and gathered into small springs. Ain Musa, about 7 kilometers east of Petra, became one of the city's principal and most dependable supplies. Winter rain entered fractures and karstic passages, moved underground, then reappeared at lower elevations as renewed spring flow. Modern hydrogeology shows these springs can respond within days, revealing a fast, closely connected underground water system below. That rapid connection also created vulnerability. Pollution entering the catchment could reach a spring with surprisingly little warning. At the source, workers guided the outflow into controlled channels instead of treating the spring as an endless reservoir. Because spring flow changed with rainfall and season, the system needed inspection, storage, and adjustment rather than blind dependence. Finding water was not enough. It still had to cross rough ground and reach Petra at a usable height. A slight continuous descent let gravity move the supply, while excessive slope could increase speed, pressure, and damage. Where terrain allowed, channels followed the contour. Where exposure threatened them, builders covered, embedded, or rerouted the line. A route kilometers long multiplied weak points, cracked plaster, displaced covers, leaking joints and sediment at every change in direction. Ain Musa was not alone. Secondary springs and local sources supplied other branches, neighborhoods, and storage basins across Petra. Some springs were stronger, others seasonal or local. Resilience came from combining them instead of trusting only one source. Reservoirs absorbed temporary surplus, balanced uneven delivery, and gave the city time when a source or conduit weakened. But springs alone could not satisfy every demand. Petra also had to capture the water that fell only briefly. A storm might last only hours. Petra's first task was to stop that brief water from escaping across bare rock. Bare sandstone shed rain quickly. Carefully cut channels intercepted selected paths, turning parts of the slope into controlled catchments. One gutter carried little. Repeated across the mountainside, many small channels collected runoff before it joined a dangerous torrent. At simple junctions, workers could send useful flow toward storage, while allowing excess water to continue. Terrace walls divided steep wadis into shorter drops, slowing runoff and reducing the force carried toward Petra below. The slowed water dropped sediment behind some terraces, building pockets of soil that could retain moisture after the storm. Not every terrace served the same purpose. Some trapped sediment, some protected fields, and some guided water onward. Captured runoff arrived carrying sand, silt, leaves, and broken rock. Sending it directly into storage would quickly consume capacity. A wider settling basin reduced velocity, allowing heavier particles to fall before the upper water moved onward. Settling made water clearer, not sterile. It removed heavy sediment, but microbes and dissolved contamination could remain. Every storm left material behind. Without repeated desilting, basins shrank, channels clogged, and later floods became harder to control. Petra used storage at many scales: household cisterns, neighborhood reservoirs, agricultural basins, and monumental pools with different demands. Rock-cut chambers were plastered and often covered, reducing debris, sunlight, and evaporation, but never eliminating leakage or loss. Laboratory analyses of Petra's cistern and pipeline linings confirm hydraulic mortars, though their materials varied between structures and phases. Petra could capture and store part of a storm. The uncontrolled remainder still accelerated toward the as-Siq and the city. The stored fraction was safe. The dangerous remainder now reached Petra's first major defense, a dam built to change direction. At as-Siq, the barrier did not simply stop water. It forced the main surge away from the ceremonial gorge. Its success depended on height, abutment, and outlet geometry. A blocked or damaged diversion could send floodwater back toward the as-Siq. The redirected flow entered the Mudhlim tunnel, a rock-cut bypass roughly 90 meters long, carrying water around Petra's main entrance. This did not make the as-Siq harmless. Local runoff still entered it, and exceptional storms could overwhelm neglected or damaged controls. South of the main approach, Wadi al-Jarrah used a chain of major dams, smaller barriers, basins, and diversion channels. Archaeologists identify 5 principal dams there, arranged so each structure reduced the energy passed to the next one downstream. Behind them, widened basins slowed water and trapped stone and silt before the remaining flow continued toward lower ground. Every dam needed an overflow path. Without one, stored energy could undermine the wall or force water around its edges. Stratigraphy and finds place much of Wadi al-Jarrah's main construction in the late 1st century BCE, during Nabataean expansion. Modern teams rebuilt selected check dams, installed gauges, and recorded rainfall and water levels during the 2019-2020 wet season. Calibrated models suggest 18 small dams could delay the flood peak by up to 25 minutes in one Petra subcatchment.
The same modeled arrangement reduced downstream water volume by about 13.5%, useful but far from total protection.
A single larger dam reduced peak flow more in the model, yet delayed the surge less than the distributed chain. Flood control bought time and protected routes. Inside the as-Siq, another system carried controlled spring water toward the city. We followed Petra's springs, storms, and flood defenses. Next come hidden pipes, pressure, and power. Please subscribe to our channel. Inside the as-Siq pipes, mineral deposits preserve a record of where water once touched the ceramic walls. The line was assembled from short terracotta sections, fitted socket to socket so it could bend with the gorge. Mortar sealed each joint and supported fragile ceramic walls. Without that bedding, movement and pressure could split the pipe. Stone covers reduced debris and exposure, yet removable sections gave workers access when sediment or mineral crust accumulated. Open basins divided the long route into shorter sections, providing inspection points and a fresh water level for each descent. Modern models suggest these basins helped reset hydraulic head, stabilizing flow before water entered the next pipe section. The surviving geometry suggests the as-Siq line often ran partially full, leaving air above water, and reducing pressure at joints. But deposits and dimensions reveal behavior, not equations. They cannot tell us exactly what Nabataean engineers calculated. Different terrain demanded different solutions: gentle gravity channels, steep pipe sections, reservoirs, and occasional pressure systems. Pipe forms changed through time, proving Petra's network was repeatedly repaired, extended, and adapted, rather than built once. Recent surveys at Ain Braq overturned the older picture of one simple aqueduct entering southern Petra. The earlier conduit appears to have used a pressurized lead pipeline to supply the large reservoir on as-Siq. Pressure allowed water to cross difficult elevation changes, but the exact operating conditions remain a modern reconstruction. A later route used open channels and terracotta pipes, ending at a small distribution box with 2 outlets. Petra's hidden network was not one finished machine. It evolved, branched, and ultimately carried water into public life. Who received it? At public fountains, a resident could collect water without owning a private pipeline, though access arrangements remain only partly understood. Archaeology does not show every house had running water. Many households probably carried it from shared or nearby storage points. Reservoirs and branch gates could direct unequal flows, but Petra's exact rules of allocation and ownership remain uncertain. At the Nymphaeum, water became both public supply and civic spectacle, gathering residents and travelers beside the colonnaded street. A household used water for drinking, cooking, washing, and cleaning. Small daily demands multiplied across an entire city. Channels from the nearby hills fed a monumental pool and an earthen terrace archaeologists interpret as a formal garden. In Petra's dry basin, maintaining a large open pool advertised command over water, labor, land, and long-term supply. The display depended on hidden daily work: clearing channels, repairing plaster, controlling inlets, and keeping planted soil irrigated. Baths demanded water beyond drinking needs, especially as collective bathing installations expanded around Petra near the Roman annexation and afterward. Near sacred routes and sanctuaries, fountains and basins may have supported drinking, cleansing, ritual preparation, or several uses together. At the Lion Fountain, Ain Braq water emerged through a carved animal mouth, making distant engineering visibly dramatic. High reservoirs transformed elevation into control. Whoever managed outlets could influence which downhill branches received water and when. A public cup and a monumental pool do not prove exact rationing, but they reveal sharply different levels of investment. In a water-scarce capital, gardens and fountains turned hydraulic competence into prestige, presenting the city as prosperous and controlled. Water became power. Subscribe as we explore the hidden labor and neglect that threatened this entire machine. Buildup challenged the system's survival. Rainfall and mineral deposits left grainy silt, sand, or scale trapped deep within channels. At Wadi al-Jarrah, maintenance stairs were carved into cliffs because workers had to reach the basin floor after winter rains. After each rainy season, alluvial deposits had to be removed before they reduced capacity, blocked outlets, or redirected future floods. Plaster cracked, pipes shifted, and dams were reinforced. Petra's engineering survived through repair, adaptation, and repeated learning. One worker could clean a basin, but coordinating springs, reservoirs, gates, and public demands required more than isolated skill. The infrastructure implies rules and authority, yet no surviving document identifies a Petra water ministry or its exact allocation system. Neglect leaves layers. As cleaning declined, fine sediment slowly rose until some lower retention basins lost much of their capacity. Petra's water landscape was already changing before catastrophe. Some monumental installations were abandoned, repaired, or reused for more practical needs. In 363 CE, a major earthquake damaged monuments, dams, channels, and pipelines, but it did not erase every water practice overnight. With key barriers broken and basins already filled, later storms reclaimed older routes, carrying debris back toward the treasury courtyard. Yet Petra continued. Byzantine documents record agriculture, springs, property, and taxation, showing a smaller city still managing land and water. Petra's hydraulic machine fragmented rather than simply vanished. Its broken layers now ask which stories are evidence and which are reconstruction. This broken conduit is direct evidence. Its original route, date, and destination still have to be reconstructed. Archaeology preserves channels, pipes, mortar, sediment, and repairs, the physical facts from which Petra's water story must begin. But stone records no flow meter, daily schedule, pressure reading, population count, or complete map of who received water. Researchers rebuild missing behavior from slope, diameter, deposits, and basin height. The result is a model, not a recovered instruction. Published reconstructions range from roughly 500 to 1,400 cubic meters daily because they model different lines and losses. Population estimates also vary, and caravans change demand. Dividing one uncertain number by another cannot yield a certain ration. A 2023 survey found a previously unknown Ain Braq branch, suggesting earlier routes toward Petra were more complex than mapped. The newest study identifies two successive conduits. First, a pressurized lead line, later open channels and terracotta pipes. Nearby runoff basins and channels show that spring supply and storm harvesting overlapped within one continually modified landscape. Petra did not lack water. It lacked a large, reliable river, while springs and seasonal runoff arrived unevenly. No single aqueduct saved Petra. Resilience came from multiple sources: storage levels, flood controls, branches, and repeated repair. Nabataean engineers clearly understood water through experience. Surviving structures do not prove they possessed modern equations or terminology. Established, the network existed. Probable, some sections managed partial or pressurized flow. Unknown, exact capacity, population, and governance. Petra's real machine was the watershed: mountains, springs, storms, dams, cisterns, pipes, reservoirs, and people working across time. Petra survived without a river because it never trusted one source, one structure, or one season to keep the city alive. We've seen Petra turn water into daily life and power. Next, workers, decline, earthquake, and unanswered questions. Subscribe for more evidence-led history.